Good afternoon. Today I will be presenting Breaking the Plateau, a data driven approach to Tier 1 excellence. So, utilizing formative assessment data from this particular school, this data dig will examine what the data reveals. It will identify instructional and assessment gaps and would also outline the next steps necessary to accelerate student learning. So Bernhardt reminds us that data should serve as a roadmap for continuous school improvement rather than a collection of isolated numbers. So when analyzed with purpose, data allows leaders to move from awareness to action. So, a trajectory of growth, what does the data say? When analyzing content mastery trends from 2022 to 2024, scores increased from 40.7 to 56.9, indicating that instructional adjustments proceeded produced measurable goals. Measurable gains. So, what does the data say? The data suggests that Tier 1 instruction has improved and is improving, producing stronger student outcomes over time. However, Fisk explains that learning organizations must continuously elevate whether growth is sustainable or situational, because growth alone is not the destination, responsiveness is. Bernhardt further emphasizes that effective leaders move beyond celebrating progress and instead ask what contributed to the growth and how can it be sustained. So, the growth has stalled, and now we're going to take a deeper look at the data. So, the 2025 preliminary score of 56.53 signals a plateau. So, what does this data say? That means that current instruction is maintaining performance rather than increasing it. This shift matters because Bernhardt identifies that stalled growth as an indicator that current practices may have reached their maximum impact. This reinforces that adaptive leadership requires educators to adjust before stagnation becomes decline. So the data is prompting us to act, not react. So, identifying the anchor, we're talking about the root cause analysis. So, a deeper analysis reveals that specific cohorts are contributing to the plateau. So, fourth grade shows 34% beginning and 40% developing, meaning that fewer than half of students are proficient. Additionally, 37% of third graders are testing below grade level. This signals future risks if interventions are not implemented early. Bernhardt stresses that disaggregating data allows leaders to pinpoint instructional needs rather than applying broad solutions. So, what is this data saying? It's saying that mostly students are entering upper grades without the literacy foundation required for mastery. And this is not a simply a performance issue, but it's also a preparation issue. So the gaps in instruction and assessment. This data identifies informational writing as the primary barrier. So 46.9% of students have a writing weakness in third grade, and 40% of students have a writing weakness in fourth grade. Students cannot demonstrate understanding if they cannot effectively communicate their thinking. So we have some instructional gaps, limited scaffolds for teaching informational writing, inconsistent differentiation during tier one instruction, and also insufficient professional learning focus on writing instruction. Our assessment gaps include formative assessments may not be capturing writing readiness early enough. Progress monitoring appears stronger in reading than it does in written expression, and also opportunities for students' explanations and extended responses may be limited. Barnhart notes that when assessment practices fail to fully measure learning, instructional decisions become reactive again rather than proactive. And fifth adds that systems improve when assessment and instruction operate as a cohesive cycle, not as separate initiatives. So this is our next steps, which is our action plan. So there are three strategic actions that's going to guide our work. And the first thing is our targeted professional learning. We're going to need to shift our professional learning towards the science of reading and explicit writing scaffolds, particularly with information and opinion genres. Barnhart reminds us that professional development must directly respond to student data to influence achievement. Our second target is strengthening instructional systems. We're going to leverage some platforms that we utilize in accounting, such as Amira, HMH into Reading, to support the fluency while building collaborative feedback loops among teachers. Fitz also explains that collaboration strengthens collective efficacy, which is a defining characteristic of high functioning learning organization. And our third target is intentional tier one differentiation. So I'm going to provide weekly support sessions. I'm going to model many lessons and co-plan writing units to ensure differentiation happens within core instruction as I serve as the school's ELS. We know that the strongest intervention is effective tier one instruction. So the target is to move the ELA mastery toward a CCRPI score of 52.45 and beyond while building systems that sustain growth. That is our target goal. So, what else comes to mind? Beyond the numbers, several leadership implementations emerge. Equity is one. Explicit vocabulary instruction is necessary to support our Black, Hispanic, and students with disability subgroups so that all learners can access rigorous content. Sustainability is another thing that comes to mind. Coaching cycles, they must build teacher capacity rather than focusing on solely on short-term goals. Fitz reminds us that lasting reform occurs when organizations invest in people, not just programs. And the last one that comes to mind is cross-curricular responsibility. Writing must extend beyond ELA into science and social studies so that students consistently practice communicating their thinking. And Barnhart emphasizes that continuous school improvement is intentional and never accidental. So this data did just reveal the four key insights that growth occurred, but it has stalled. Specific cohorts are driving the plateau. Informational writing is the largest instructional barrier, and strategic systemic action is required. So, as leaders, our responsibility is not simply to analyze the data, it's to create the conditions where improvement becomes inevitable. We know because when instruction is improved, the outcomes they follow. When capacity grows, we know that achievement accelerates. And when leadership is intentional, those plateaus becomes pathways to our progress. So, thank you so much for um, taking part in this data dig on this afternoon.